excited to spend more time with you at C2E2, and thank you again for the flexibility and understanding that technology sucks.
Yeah, I missed you.
So, okay, well, I appreciate that. So we're doing something special for ComicsOnline's 25th anniversary, which is to talk about secret origins, and I would love to hear your secret origin of how you found your way into the world of comics and entertainment.
Yeah. So my secret origin was I actually went to art school to draw comic books. That's what, well, at least I thought I was going to. That's all I did in high school, and then I went there and really quickly discovered from my art teacher that I was never going to be Jim Lee. So I was like, okay, this is not quite working out the way I wanted. But I ended up going to film school because I figured I can do that. And because that's so much easier than being a comic artist. But I did that, and in the middle of that, I actually started regaining, reading comics again because some of my friends were really into it. So as I was doing film and all that stuff, I never sort of lost my love of comics. And then I ended up working on several films, and one of them I met Kyle Higgins, who was also working. I had written a short film, and I was on there, and Kyle was working on the sound. And I remember looking down, he was editing this movie called The League, which is a short film that ended up becoming Cowl. And so I looked down, I was like, what's that? He's like, oh, it's a superhero movie. I was like, we should talk. And so we started becoming friends. And then when he and I both moved up to LA, we stayed friends, and he started editing, he started pitching comics and all that stuff, and I would help him, and he ended up making his way in there while I was working as an assistant in the world. And so one day I was on my desk, Kyle was working on, I think he was doing Batman Gets a Gotham, and he got Nightwing and Deathstroke in the same week. And he's like, hey, I got to do these 2 books. You've been helping me break this. Do you want to come in and write this book? And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. So I ended up going, so I'd work all day in the office from 8 to 6, and then I'd go to his house, and we'd write the whole book. And we wrote issue 3, 4, and 5 in 3 weeks. It was really fast. And that was sort of my baptism by fire of writing comics. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really fun and exciting. And, Batman's your first comic book. That's exactly the way it's supposed to work out. So I did that, and then because of that, I went out. I remember I bought the comic at the comic store, and I brought it in. I was super excited, and my bosses saw it. And I worked for Bad Robot at the time, and one of them was Brian Burke, who produced Lost. And he said, "Hey, I didn't know you were." He's like, "Can I read your comic?" And I was like, "Sure." And I gave it to him, and he read it, and he's like, "That's pretty good." He's like, "Do you want to do more?" And I was like, oh, yeah. He's like, we do Star Trek. Yeah, I was like, yeah, I know Star Trek. And he's like, Joe, you want to? So I got an opportunity to do that. I got to meet with Mike Johnson, who's been writing Star Trek comics forever. He's written almost all of them. And so we sat down and talked, and he was like, he didn't really want me on the book. He was like, you're taking my money. But I was like, I had an idea, and I pitched it, and I did that book, and then that kind of led to getting to do Power Rangers and so on and so forth. And that's kind of how I got into comics. It was my first love that I took a very, I took the long and winding road back to comic books.
One of the stories you've shared with me before was how you actually got the Power Ranger opportunity. Would you mind re-sharing that with our audience?
Oh, yeah. So when you first start in comics, the first panels you do are kind of a big deal. They're terrifying. But Long Beach Comic Con was going on, and it's an easy drive. And so they were like, hey, would you be interested in doing, I think it was called Writing for Licenses. And because I'd written Star Trek at the time, I'd done the Revolution comic book because I was writing on TV's Revolution. And I was like, sure, I did that. So I got on that panel, and that panel, I think it had Jackson and Colin, who did a lot of Star Trek. And I don't remember who the 4th person on that panel was, but it was moderated by Daphne Plevin, and Daphne Plevin was the editor on Power Rangers at the time, which I didn't know that. So we got on the panel, and we did the whole thing, and I talked to the whole panel. After the panel, we went and got drinks afterwards, and like you do. And I remember I had made a comment, and this is going to come back to haunt me. I remember I said something about not liking the Winter Soldier, and I remember Daphne Plevin sort of threw her beer down and ran over to me and was like, hey, you're wrong, and let me tell you why. And it turned into a 45-minute conversation about her telling me why I was wrong, and we went back and forth. But anyways, from that, a few weeks later, I got a call from her saying, hey, I really enjoyed talking story with you. Would you be interested in, they're making a new Power Ranger movie. Would you be interested in potentially being a part of that? And I was like, oh, so it pays to disagree with somebody about a movie because that might get you a job. So we went and met and talked about the idea, and ultimately I wrote Power Rangers Aftershock, which was the sequel to the movie. And then because we had a really good relationship on that, she said, I don't know if you're interested, but we're thinking about doing a prequel series because Kyle Higgins is writing this is really fun. But one thing I don't think I've ever said, I remember I went to San Diego Comic-Con and I had a meeting with Daphne after Aftershock, and I'm going upstairs to the bar, and Kyle's there, and he goes, hey man, I don't know if you know, or no, I know what happened. He's like, I'm going to put you up. I think they're going to do a new Power Ranger series. I'm going to put you up for it. I was like, I'm meeting Daphne in 10 minutes. And he goes, oh, then you're already up for it. He didn't know we knew each other. So yeah, so that's how I sat down, and she said, we want to do a Power Ranger series that's 60% monsters or 60% high school, 40% monsters. Is that something you're interested in? And I was like, absolutely. And then the rest is history.
Everything you did with Go-Go, and then even to Necessary Evil, and just continuing through the Eltarian War, I absolutely loved. And Power Rangers Ninja Turtles, I don't think you could have had any more fun if you tried, and I hope you get to do more with that universe in particular.
Me too. I really, it's been crazy. I think I did the math. I think when you add Go-Go and Mighty Morphin, and you add in some of the one-shots, so I think I did close to like 100 issues, or like 100 and change, and it's crazy to still think I'm like, well, I got some more stories in me, it'd be fun. So yeah, I hope I get to play in that world just a little bit more sometime.
You, Kyle, Melissa, everyone has really fleshed out so much of the mythology of the characters we've known and loved for over 30 years. So it's fun to see them continue with their journey and their adventures in this medium.
Yeah, Melissa's killing it. I love what they're doing with Prime. I really love. It felt like a nice jolt in the arm again, because it was like, you can only threaten them so many times, and it's like, let's try something new. Let's try something that combines the universe that we love with the characters that remember in some really fun ways. And I've really it's been fun to be able to just read the Power Ranger comic books as a fan for the first time, because for a while there I was like, I knew everything was going on. Now I'm like, every week I get to go to the store and pick it up and be like, what's going to happen now? Which is fun.
Well, I know they just released the soft cover of the Eltarian War, but there was a scene in particular we never actually got to discuss that I just came to mind. Zordon and Zed's interaction on the moon was one of my favorites from that entire run. Could you talk about breaking that story in particular?
Yeah, that was something like, that's a fun part, like, because we built up the whole element of, like, that Zordon and Zed had a relationship in the past, and it takes them a while to learn about it, and it was fun to actually, I was like, I want them to fight. I want to see the two of them go at it, for the first time and put them in the body. And then I liked the idea of, like, that thing after you've won, the idea of, like, the two of them just sitting there, and I thought there was something it was something interesting about the idea of when we made it so that Zed, and spoilers to anybody who hasn't read this, but
it's been out for years. I think we're okay.
You never know. But with Zed, the idea that he had been an Eltarian, he had been Zordon's mentor. I really loved that idea of when we decided, okay, that's what had happened, that when he touched I'm blanking on the crystal's name. Zeo Crystal, thank you. Yeah, the one that show's named after. Zeo Crystal, and it had been burned off his skin. I love the idea when you found that out, you're like, okay, so he's an Eltarian who got disfigured trying to save the universe, whatnot. And then he saw how he was remembered and how things happened. And then the same thing happens to Zordon with Rita, and the idea that he'd had his body destroyed in the same way. And I love, there was like a part there I was like, oh, there should be a conversation about that. And the idea that they both had something horrific happen to them. One of them looked at it and went, oh man, like, I hate everyone because of what happened to me. While Zordon was like, I am still alive and have the ability to keep this fight going. And I love that Zed calls him on that and goes, I thought, even after this had happened to you, that you'd come around to seeing the world the way that I did. And when he didn't, that frustrated him and hurt him even more. And I thought that was a really neat, like, relationship. And then the idea that we got into that thing of, like, Zed kind of looking down at Zordon and saying, will the power protect you? And he's just like, if the power is real, why did it let that happen to both of us? And the idea that Zordon was like, that's not really what I'm talking about. Like, we're the power and stuff. I know some people find that a little trite, and the idea that there's not, but I just like that idea that, like, Zordon I think Zordon has a pretty wide perspective of the universe and reality and how we are all connected and stuff. He's pure energy in a lot of ways. And I think you would just have a very different perspective on, I don't want to say religion, because that's not what it is, but this idea of connection, of sort of like connectivity, and the idea of, like, that's what the power is. It's all of us. It's what we are. I know it's hard to come up, but that was the thing that I liked, was that idea that we got to, like, articulate that moment. And so I know some people didn't like it, but I enjoyed it. So
it was one of my favorites from your entire run, and also the imagery of Zed handing off Zordon's damaged body to Alpha, and hear Robot take him.
Yeah.
Just it was such a cool scene, and the character moments I think are the ones that hit the hardest for us as readers. So you're really good at pulling at our heartstrings.
Oh, thank you. I mean, if you can't cry in a comic book, what are you doing, right? But I agree. That was I liked that moment of just sort of like, I think Zed kind of wants to, I don't think he just wants to beat Zordon. He doesn't understand why, we've ever been around somebody that feels differently politically or religiously or more morally, and you're just like, I don't understand why you see that. We look at the same thing, and I look at that, and I see red, and you see green, and that's so weird to me. And I feel like that's part of what Zed is. That's why he's not killing. He doesn't want to just kill Zordon. He's like, I don't understand how you can see the world and the universe one way, and I see it another way. And I feel like he needs to break Zordon to make him do that. He's just they are in a argument, and you don't want to kill somebody in an argument. You want them to concede and see the world your way. And that was what I liked, that idea, that when he says, I'm sorry this happened to you, or I think his last line is, I would do anything in the world to make it, to bring back the man that you were. And he's like, I never was the man you think I was. And I like that was a neat thing, because it has different levels and stuff about that, so I like.
Well, let's cut to present day.
Yes.
Rogue Sun just hit a milestone. Congratulations, 25th issue is a big deal in the world of comics. How does it feel to get to this? Yeah, little thing.
It's a little thing. That's
little
fine.
thing.
I'll take that.
But how does it feel getting to get to this point with Dylan's journey, knowing that he's gone through a lot in 24 preceding issues, but now knowing that his sister is involved, as
Right.
Rogue Sun, how does it feel to get to play with this next step in his journey?
It's crazy when you think about 25 issues, because I remember I was looking at like the covers the other day, and I was like, it's been almost 2.5 years that we working on this thing, or 3 years, and I was like, man, it feels like yesterday. So that part's crazy, and then you realize it's like 24 issues is a lot, but it doesn't feel like that much when you just write it all that way. So I've enjoyed sort of finding the journey of him. Like I was pretty clear on what I wanted the first 6 issues to be, the idea of it being sort of a giant sort of superhero metaphor for divorce. But what's been fun about that is like taking that and sort of expanding it out and looking at the idea of like, how does it's about family now, right? It's about mentors, it's about step parents, it's about the people in your life that, can be important to you, like that guide you and change you and mold you into the person you are, not just your parents. The found family element is something I think every book is really, really, like people really like, I like. So, but with bringing Ari back in at 25 and making her Rogue Sun, I really like the idea of that concept. Like, so I used to be I haven't said this to anybody. I used to be a nanny, and both of the kids that I nanny are now professional baseball players. Yes, I taught them everything they know. But what was really interesting about that was watching one of them, the older one who's plays for the Blue Jays, he's a catcher, was really, really good. And his brother was younger and got better at it. It started getting better and better and getting more accolades. Watching two people who love each other but compete against one another and make each other better and disagree with each other, that was what inspired this arc with the idea of Dylan and Ari. Like two people who are both doing the same thing, and what happens when one of them gets better than the other one? What happens when the other one knows a little bit more? And the idea that they can love someone but also be sort of in competition with them, that's kind of what I wanted this arc to be about.
I mean, well, the first issue of 25, of this new era really kicks off strong. I can't wait to dive into 26. Image just sent me the press copy, so after C2E2, that'll be next on my list.
Awesome.
My last question for you, we talked a little bit yesterday about the idea of legacy, and if one issue, one story of yours were to survive the end of the world and the test of time, what would it be and why?
Oh boy. I think it's not. There's one that sort of like comes to mind. It's not for something that I wrote, but it was an interaction I had with a fan that was really cool. I was like, it was early days of like my comic career, and I think it was at WonderCon or LA Comic Con. I can't remember exactly which one, but I was there, and it was like one of the first conventions I did, and I was by myself sitting at this table, and I hadn't really seen anybody. And in the middle of this stuff, this little girl comes up. She must have been like 7 or 8. She was really, really young, and which is weird because little kids at comic conventions already get your attention. She came up to me and she had a copy of, I think it was Star Trek 19, which is an Uhura issue that I'd written, and she obviously read this thing. It was a little bit worked over, which is always the coolest thing. And she puts it up on the table, and when I realized her mom was with her, and I realized she was deaf. And my mom was a translator, so I know a little bit of sign language, which was really fun. I don't get to use it very often. So I sort of chatted with her, and her mom said, she asked me to sign it, and she was like, and she told me that the reason her daughter loves comics so much is that she can experience it the same way that everybody else can. And that kind of broke my heart, and I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. And so I signed the copy for her, and I signed thank you to her, and her eyes kind of lit up, and I was like, that is like, and she kind of walked away and she like looked up at her mom and was like signing, and I kind of saw what they were saying, and it was like really great. And so for me, that issue, it was like the first thing I ever wrote that I thought was like really emotional, and it was about her as sort of like finding her voice and finding the talent that she had, and it was a family story. So the idea that it connected with somebody at that age and that they felt that was something that they were so excited to see me was like, that's amazing. So that was my favorite one.
That's a wonderful story. I shared it with my wife after I got back yesterday, and she was like, okay, that's the kind of story you want to hear, right? So I think that's the kind of moment that we want to hear for interviews and for stories that we get to share out, and thank you. I think the vulnerability of that it's nice and refreshing, so appreciate it. So lastly, I was going to say, we've been doing interviews since Necessary Evil. that was our first interview at San Diego Comic-Con, and I really appreciate you brought me along for the ride and gotten to share all the behind the scenes and the stories. It means a lot to me personally, and I just want to make sure I conveyed that.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And I'll be honest, these interviews are really helpful for writers. Sometimes being able to articulate our stuff in the middle of writing something is like just what I told you about Ari. I'm like, oh, I got to make sure that that's actually in the story. So like, I appreciate that, and it's been amazing, and we'll be hopefully keep doing this for a little while.